discussion, is this an international question? Should we regulate drugs on an international level or on a national level, or should perhaps the local government be more involved?
And this is a very relevant topic in our society, drugs. And what exactly has 100 years of prohibition and 50 years of war on drugs brought us? So there's been produced more cocaine than ever at the expense of the environment and climate. There are more drugs than ever. And drugs are relatively cheap, at least here in the Netherlands. So are we effective? That's the question. Drugs are also widely available, despite prohibition. You can get it everywhere. Enforcement costs us as a society 3 to 4 billion euros annually. And if you look at the war on drugs that exists for over 50 years, it's 1 trillion, so 1,000 miljard in Dutch. And it costs extensive capacity of law enforcement. And I ask again, with what effect?
As Bart told you, my brother died in 2006. I'm not going to pull the emotional card. I've done that before. But it made some things moving in my head, because I was trained as a military police officer. Because in the beginning of my career, I was part of the military. Then I skipped the details of this reorganization. But I was a military trained to fight the war on drugs, and I did do the war on drugs. I'm still doing it. I'm still waging this war on drugs on a daily basis. But after my brother died, I started looking into, or started questioning what I was doing, what we were doing. Now, is this the right approach? Because my brother died, and I was still convinced that having something punitive behind the door that might help him finally to get clean and to stay sober. Was I wrong? So at a certain moment I started vetting the internet. I came across the website of Transform Drug Policy Foundation, and they recruited me. Yes, they actually recruited me because they asked me to speak at the launch of LEAP UK, which was in 2016, I think. For the first time, I spoke in public in the British Parliament, sitting aside Neil Franklin. I think Diane was there too. Who was there as well? Johan Harry, best-selling author of Chasing the Scream. Quite an impressive audience, and I was there for the first time speaking in public about drug reform and drug policy. Over the past decades, prohibition has been primarily a political-driven policy. As I told you, this politicization has skewed drug research towards demonstration of drug harms to justify punitive responses to the drug threat, if it is a threat. The actual outcomes of and alternatives to prohibition have not been meaningfully scrutinized. That is one of my reproaches I make to politicians. They don't do the efforts. They just close the door. Once you start talking about other policies, then they close the door. The modifications of drug policy discussed here should be accompanied by a similar modification of drug research. In particular, options and outcomes relating to policies intended to mitigate drug harms should be carefully explored. Research that allows legislative bodies at every level, internationally, national and local, to every level, that to learn from and share specific constructive lessons from our existing experience of prohibition should also be put in place. Now, let me go through some reactions that you will get once you step on the stage and you start debating other drug policies. One of them would be, if you are advocating for legal regulation, that would mean a drug-free for all society. Of course, that is not true. Although the legal regulation of drugs is sometimes characterized as a liberalization or a relaxation of the law, it is in fact completely the opposite. Because at that time you are bringing the drug trade within the law, and now it is outside the law. You bring it within the law so that strict controls can be applied. Such controls are impossible to impose under prohibition. Legal regulation enables responsible governments to control which drugs can be sold, who has access to them, and where they can be sold. Under prohibition, it is the criminal world who will decide where or make those decisions.
For decades, our approach to drug markets has been fragmented. Law enforcement on one side, public health on the other. But the truth is we're fighting the same war, just from different angles. And if we're serious about saving lives, reducing harm, and restoring communities, we must move from parallel efforts to a unified strategy. The men and women involved weren't just selling their bodies, they were trying to survive, often driven by a need to feed their dependency. The same pattern held true for burglaries in my area of responsibility. Suspects were frequently stealing items that they could sell just to support their addiction. And that brings us to the dilemma. So much of what police respond to, so many of the crimes, the disturbances, the emergencies are rooted in addiction. And because of that, many have come to believe that policing is the only solution, but it's not. We fail to recognize drug addiction for what it truly is, a public health crisis. Until we treat it as such, we will continue to chase shadows while the real problem grows in plain sight.
Significantly pushing our policies back to the height of the drug war, which I participated in. And like Peter, I share some commonalities. Unfortunately, my brother died from a polydrug overdose in 2007. And what I saw in my policing career, because I was operational, I ran a surveillance team, I did joint terrorism task force surveillance, I did crisis management, is that I saw both the personal and the professional experience relative to the failures of the system, which law enforcement sometimes doesn't have the ability to change in a way that is meaningful in ordinary people's lives and in making ordinary people's lives better. And for me, that the most troubling thing right now is we are moving back to that failed, tough-on crime, drug war.
And Hans, how do you see this local and international development contrasting?
Yes, it's quite difficult because the drug treaties from the United Nations are the oldest global treaties that we have. So they influenced all drug policies on national, European, and local scale, and even in families, personal scale. So in order to really change drug policy, basically you have to go back to the beginning, which is the international drug treaties, the opium laws, 1918 in The Hague, the treaties. There you should go back to. But I fully agree with the audience and with Carla and a lot of other people. Start locally, start experiments. They see they're on the ground with their feet in the mud. Work it out there, experiment, and make the best practices. Use that in other places.
And then hopefully it trickles.
So why do cities matter in the battle against drugs? Well, we have the police fighting crime, we have the national government making laws, but also investing millions of euros for organized and subversive crime. But cities have a responsibility when it comes to health and when it comes to safety. We have, for example, for the health side, we have the information that municipality gives on drugs and on drug use, but also the test service that the
which we together have actions which we are proud on, and with a lot of marketing is needed, and publicity is needed. Those are the actors in our society who changes, and we have to cooperate with that. Well, that's an invitation to all of you and for me too. So thank you very much for your attention here and the wise words I heard. Thank you very much.
If you want to continue our discussion, and I really would like to thank our panel and our speakers, and we have a small attention, but we'll present it to you afterwards. Thank you very much for your attention.